Welcome to the 700 Club. North Korea appears to be changing its tone after President Trump canceled the Singapore summit. Well, today, a North Korean official says they're still willing to sit down for talks with the United States at any time, at any format.
The president decided to pull out of the summit after signs of bad faith from the North Koreans. But he said if Kim Jong-un is ever ready to talk seriously about getting rid of his nuclear weapons, all he needs to do is pick up the phone. As Jennifer Wishon reports, now it's a game of wait and see.
A bold move by President Trump, a letter to Kim Jong-un canceling the leader's planned nuclear summit. He surprised the world, but the Trump administration saw it coming for days.
North Korea has the opportunity to end decades of poverty and oppression by following the path of denuclearization and joining the community of nations.
After Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's meeting with Kim that resulted in the release of 3 American prisoners, the North Koreans failed to keep their promises.
It's not about the deal. It's about the outcome, right? It's about achieving this permanent physical change and transformation that will have the opportunity to change the world.
After Trump's announcement, North Korea seemed to change its tone. A top official saying the Kim regime is open-minded in giving time and opportunity to the U.S. But for now, the Trump administration is continuing its maximum pressure campaign, crippling economic sanctions meant to force concessions out of a country already facing financial despair. But in these hours following the president's letter, Harry Kazianis with the Center for National Interest says he fears the North will return to testing missiles.
God forbid, if the North Koreans test a missile in the next couple of days and there's a malfunction, the missile lands in Seoul or in Japan or over Guam, we could be at war. And that type of war would involve millions of people dead.
Time, he says, isn't on Kim's side, as his people are more exposed to influences from the world outside North Korea. They may learn there's a better way.
That's what happens when you actually get in on these situations. You start to give people hope something can be different. They start to press for it.
A senior White House official says the ball is now in North Korea's court.
If and when Kim Jong-un chooses to engage in constructive dialogue and actions, I am waiting.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the White House.
Well, joining us now from Washington is our national security correspondent, Eric Rosales. Eric, how did this fall apart? What did the North Koreans do?
Well, I tell you what, Gordon, I attended an off-camera White House background briefing, and the White House senior official that Jennifer alluded to basically spelled out the reasons why President Trump was forced to walk away from this summit. 2 weeks after President Trump agreed to meet with Kim Jong-un, North Korea started contesting the military exercises between South Korea and the United States that were taking place off the Korean Peninsula. Then North Korea stood up Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the South Koreans in Singapore. That was a meeting in preparation for the upcoming summit. And I think the straw that really broke the camel's back took place Wednesday night of this week, when North Korea sent a propaganda letter to the White House. It stated, "Meet us in the meeting room or meet us with a nuclear-to-nuclear showdown." So President Trump had to take the action and walk away from this meeting.
Well, what about the latest news that they're already saying they want to come back to the table? Is that a change?
Oh, yeah, definitely a change. Just hours after President Trump said that the summit was over, North Korean's dictator Kim Jong-un sent out a delegation to speak with reporters who were there to witness the so-called destruction of the nuclear testing site that was out there. And the delegation wanted the president to know that Kim Jong-un is ready to sit down. But, if any of you have read Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, this is exactly coming out of the playbook of President Trump. When a deal isn't good for your side, you basically just walk away. And more than likely, the other party will come calling, and that's exactly what Kim Jong-un is doing right now.
What should happen at this point? Are we just waiting, sort of in a waiting game for North Korea to do something? And if so, what are we looking for?
Yeah, we asked that question to the senior White House official, and the senior White House official says we need to be able to see a difference in Kim Jong-un. As of right now, Kim Jong-un failed to allow any foreign or international scientists to inspect the testing site of that nuclear weapon. I also did speak with Pentagon sources who tell me that the satellite pictures that they've examined, it appears that the nuclear testing site may still be in operation. Pentagon source spokeswoman Dana White actually said in a briefing just yesterday that the U.S. is ready to fight. She described it as we're in a boxing stance, basically ready to take a punch if we need to be. But of course, we're all hoping for a diplomatic solution.
All right. Well, Eric, thanks for the insights. Let's continue to pray that there needs to be some solution here. We can't have a nuclear North Korea. We can't have Guam, Hawaii, the West Coast in the United States, subject to some kind of nuclear terrorism. That's not a world any of us want to live in. But how do we get them to the bargaining table? And more importantly, how do we get them to give up their nuclear weapons? It's been a long-standing dream that two Koreas could come together and once again there'd be one Korea. It happened in Germany. It happened West and East Germany. Came together. Can it happen with North and South Korea? Well, let's pray it does. Well, Christians in North Korea are jailed and tortured for their faith, but it's just one of many nations where the church is under fire. The increase of Christian persecution around the globe has religious freedom advocates demanding answers. They want to know why believers in the West aren't doing more for those who are suffering for following Jesus. Paul Strand has more.
Christians of all stripes came to this summit asking, why don't believers do more to help their persecuted brothers and sisters around the globe? They hit at Christians in the first world living cushy lives with little thought for those under attack overseas.
We cannot claim Christ only to form our lives around the comforts and the conveniences of the modern Western life without paying mind to the injustice of the Christian persecution that we see around the world.
The keynote speaker pointed out Jesus told Saul of Tarsus that Saul was attacking Christ when he attacked Christians.
When people persecute Christians, they're really persecuting who? Jesus. In the same way, when we care for the persecuted, we're really caring for Jesus. And that's why Jesus said, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me.
Spudo said he was once considering how much money to donate to starving Christians in Nigeria.
And the Lord whispered something into my heart that I don't believe I'll ever forget. He said, that's me. I'm hungry. And I'm waiting and watching to see who loves me and will give me something to eat.
Longtime defender of religious freedom, Frank Wolf, knocked believers' willful silence.
The church in the West can never say it does not know what is taking place in Iraq or the Middle East today. And Dr. Martin Luther King, to quote him again, said, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends.
Wolf then had a warning for America's Christians.
If the church slumbers, Washington will scarcely lead the way.
Sam Brownback is America's new ambassador at large for international religious freedom.
There's more persecution going on now than a number of authorities have said than any time in the history where we've had recorded history.
But he said governments that persecute believers ignore studies showing their nations will be less successful and more troubled.
If you want less terrorism, you need more religious freedom. If you want more economic growth, you need more religious freedom.
Just remember, we're here today because Jesus is still being persecuted through his children. And how we respond to them is really our response to Jesus.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Well, it's time to wake up to the Christian persecution that's happening around the world. And we do have an administration that's willing to act. And let's see what we can do. It's not just in the Middle East. It's not just in Egypt and Syria and Iraq and Iran and Saudi Arabia. It's happening in Indonesia. It's happening in India. Christians are being persecuted. In Pakistan, they're being killed for their faith. And we need to do something about it. We need to stand up and say these nations need to be held accountable.